super excited to just be with you, Laura. You're one of my favorite people, as I mentioned. I'll never forget my son being born, and the first gift to arrive was from you, a little plush stuffed elephant. I think business is personal, and when you meet people along the way, it's what makes it all worthwhile. And certainly that's been the case in our relationship. So awesome to have you as a partner for so long.
Couldn't agree more. The feeling is mutual.
Awesome. So today, I think we're talking about scaling, a CPG brand and sales, and there's probably nobody more qualified to speak on that subject than you, SVP of sales at MUSH, a brand that is on wildfire right now, and also, formerly SVP of RX Bar, which had a big exit to Kellogg, which you saw all the way through. I'm the director of business development at Dirty Hands. As I mentioned, we have been partnership and together growing brands at retail for for years now across multiple brands. And I think everybody just wants to kind of, what's the success, what's the secret code, what do you know that we don't know? You're a keeper of so much valuable information, and I think we need to just spend some time today kind of uncovering that, asking a few questions, and then as we talked about in the pre-chat, just getting to opening it up to the floor and letting other people ask questions. So let's kind of kick off, and I'm just going to kind of read through the list as silly as it sounds, and just I want to get people right into it and let you just kind of wrap on what you have to share.
Great.
The first question is really having run sales at two very successful brands, what's the secret to scaling a successful CPG brand? Let's just kick off with a bang.
Great. Yeah, let's do it. And for anybody who I haven't met before, I've been in the industry now for a little over 15 years. I studied food marketing at St. Joe's in Philadelphia, a small Jesuit school there where I'm originally from. And since graduating, I've worked for large and established brands like Nestle, down to small and emerging brands like Noon, RX Bar, and now MUSH. And I've held kind of different positions across retail sales and merchandising, which is why I love and appreciate Dirty Hands so much, but also analytics, regional sales, national account management, channel ownership, and now leading the sales function, which is what I'm doing here at MUSH. So, I wish I could tell you that there was like one big secret. So I might let you down a little bit to say that, like, I don't know that there is one secret to scaling sales. Like, no, I don't know if you've ever read The Hard Thing About Hard Things before. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, great book for those of you who are really in business in general, but especially an emerging company. But, one of the themes there is like, there's no silver bullet. It's a lot of small lead bullets to succeed. So I tried to put down my thoughts in terms of what are some of these key learnings or small lead bullets that can help you along the way. So I think first and foremost, it's about remaining grounded in your unique value proposition and your core consumer group. I think the more you can understand what people love about your product, how they interact with it, and where they shop, you're so much more able to clearly identify like what types of channels and retailers make sense, how to build that story, how to engage with consumers to drive more awareness of your brand. So I think that that's something that should be, besides your mission and your core values, something that's guiding you along the way. I would say second, invest in data earlier than what feels comfortable and learn how to interpret it. I'm a huge advocate of investing in analytics, and I just truly think that without insights, it's nearly impossible to understand your performance. It's nearly impossible to have meaningful conversations with retailers, especially as you're getting to your second, third conversation with a big player. Mm-hmm. I think it's hard to evaluate strategic new opportunities. I think it makes it tough to forecast. So that's that's another thing that I think is super important as you're scaling, and it feels like such a big investment, especially when you're small. But we've had access to syndicated data since we were, in the low single digits of millions of dollars in revenue, and it's been so helpful for everything from the day to day to longer term planning. So I think that's a second secret sauce, I would say. Third, this kind of one of my favorite things to say is like fewer, bigger, better. Just do a few things really, really well. So the next theme that comes to mind is like, don't get distracted by shiny objects. Are you familiar with Farnham Street at all, or like the Knowledge Project podcast with Shane Paris, or Parrish, I think his last name is. Well, they put on a really great newsletter every Sunday, and it's really short. It only has maybe like 5 small pieces of content. So highly recommend subscribing to Brain Food. They're just like really great nuggets of wisdom to help you in life and in business. And one of the things that I keep close to my heart that I took away from one of their newsletters was the greatest threat to results are boredom and impatience. And the only way to become good at something is to practice the ordinary basics for an uncommon length of time. I think that living in a world of social media and just like constant stimulation, it's really easy to start like questioning yourself or feeling like you need to change things up. And so, if you step back and look at the food industry, you look at big established brands, Coke, Pepsi, Red Bull, Cliff Bar, Kind Bar, Chobani, I can almost guarantee that like 60+% of their revenue is coming from a core product base.
Right.
And so remembering that innovation can come in many shapes and forms. It doesn't just always have to be brand extensions or extending your team too far. Sometimes it's just about optimizing your core business. And I think it's something that's easy to get impatient on because you're going to feel like I've been doing the same thing for so long. But you even translate it over to sports, like Michael Jordan. He lived, ate, and breathed basketball, and because of that is one of the greatest of all time. So staying away from shiny objects. I think a key enabler for successful leadership through scales is really just like consistent thinking, communicating, and aligning. So like the bigger your team gets, the more that's happening without you there. Right? So it's like so important to be articulating the why, the how, the what, the who, the when, and just continuously aligning with your team. You're going to feel like a broken record, but I kind of feel like as soon as you feel like you're a broken record, you still haven't reinforced things enough. So I think that's another key piece. And then the last secret sauce, whatever we want to call it, I would say is listening. So whether that's listening to consumers, listening to retailers, listening to your team. People think about sales and they think about used car salesmen, or they think about pushy sales people that love to talk, people that, maybe like this to be the center of attention. But I truly don't think sales and leadership, for that matter, are about oneself at all. It's actually all about other people. So, the more that you can listen, the more you're going to learn, and therefore the more you're going to evolve and grow, whether that be for your customers, for your team, for your, partners. So I think that that's another key one that I had to learn early on. But if you would have heard me on one of my first sales calls, you'd be like, oh my gosh, you memorized some page out of Nestle's handbook and spoke to it until you're blue in the face. So I think listening is a key one. So those would be some of the secret sauces I would say.
Those are amazing. I mean, such valuable insight. I think I'd love to get kind of a resource list that we can share with everybody too for some of the books and stuff that you're recommending.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think about, just the way that we approach sales as a company as well. We talk about just the humanity of it, right? And we talk about people, and it really is all people. And we live in a world of, now like basically artificial intelligence and things can be done for you and robotics and this and that. But like, in my experience, it's still very much about people. You referenced data as being, a core pillar to secret sauce and investing in that early. But question for you is like, how do you see that, like the old school handshake, drop the case off, with a printed invoice? Like, how do you see, you know, your ability to use data, and how do you connect that with more of a relationship driven, human based approach, which I know that is important to you?
Yeah, I think both are extremely important, right? Because at the end of the day, um, I heard this the other day, like people like to buy from people, right?
Yeah.
People don't really want to buy from a vendor or buy from a store. They want to buy from people. So if you can really ground yourself in that and think about basic human needs like connection, wanting to feel understood, wanting to feel heard, and keep that approach, but layer the icing on top with data to really say, look, we're basing this off of the credibility we built together and the trust we built together. And here's that proof point. Especially as it relates to trying to get your product in or building that sales story. But on top of that, it translates internally as well. If you're trying to advocate for resources, for capacity, if you're trying to advocate to invest in expanding your merchandising, support, being able to first rely on the human connection you've built with your internal partners, but then layering in, hey, here's what I think see the opportunity is, and it's rooted in not just intuition, but the numbers. I think it really ties well together.
Yeah. So it's a complement to the human based, human centered approach that you take for sure.
For sure.
So you mentioned SKU rationalization as, like, I think that's a core tenet of, in my opinion, kind of early stage success, like making sure that you
Mhm.
back the horse that wins. Um, as you scale, which is the topic of this conversation, it would make sense to say, I build this pipeline, I should run more products through it. Is that necessarily true? Or how do you think about SKU rationalization as you scale?
Yeah, I mean, we've done a ton of it since I joined 3.5 years ago. And even now, we've really been developing our marketing team over the last year. And part of that has been a lot of consumer research, both by third and first party. And some of the findings were like, hey, the flavors that we have versus maybe the flavors that consumers would want don't necessarily align. And that's where you have those kind of crucial conversations around like, hey, does it make sense to add on to the 9 core flavors that we already have? Or should we really take a look at what's maybe not performing as strongly as we thought, or what's maybe not as optimal from a supply chain perspective, or maybe what's not as incremental? And really digging in, and that's where data can really be helpful as well. And really just making sure that you're fighting for the amount of space that makes sense for you in terms of your performance, your brand stage, your awareness, what have you, and that you're optimizing for that. So, as an example, we figured out that we have like 3 core flavors that we're missing. We swapped them in. We didn't say, you know what, we should have a portfolio of 14 core products. I mean, there's hardly any yogurt brands that have one type of yogurt with 13 flavors. So, I think it really is making sure that you're walking stores, you're looking at data, you're understanding the landscape of the category and thinking about the right amount of space for what kind of value you can add and continue to optimize for it.
Cool. Yeah, it makes sense. Take me through like your day, like your team, like what do you do, and how do you make this whole thing work, right? Like, because I think it's just, I have a small team myself, but we're so connected and so bonded, and like, I'm just curious, like, what does that look like for you on the manufacturer side, on the brand side?
Mhm.
How do you spend your hours? How do you optimize your day?
Yeah, at the most basic level, my role is to deliver the right go to market strategy at the right time with the right resources. So when you think about what goes into that, first and foremost, it's people. So hiring and developing a best-in-class team and continuing to nurture them alongside with nurturing the business. So I think, people is a big component of my role and my day, whether that's, continuing to refine strategy, whether that's evaluating our performance, whether that's implementing a new process, whether that's just having a basic conversation, seeing how people are doing and feeling, checking in. People's a big part, touching on strategy. We have two big pieces there that are part of my role. So distribution, assortment, placement, and then price and promo, like your basic 4Ps, right? Like how are we tying what it is we know about our core consumer group into a go-to-market strategy in terms of what channels, what retailers, what placement, continue to refine that further with my team so that we're really clear on what it is that we're marching toward. So that's another big component of my role, and that continues to evolve because we learn so much every single day. You guys see it too as a growing business. On the price and promo side, that's a tricky thing to navigate. You want to try to build this like frictionless pricing architecture across not just your core product, but future pack types or maybe current pack types that you have and the channels that you're going to be in both now and in the future. So that's another key part. Process, that's one of the hardest things. People that are really like entrepreneurial like to move really, really quickly, and maybe they're not as focused on the nitty gritty and the details. So getting people to slow down, to speed up and figure out where do we need to optimize, where can we maybe add a software, a tool, a new way of working, and that's like a continuous cycle. And then I would say the other big part of my day is working cross-functionally. We all can't exist without one another. So there's a lot of conversations and partnership across marketing, finance, operations, et cetera. So no one day is the same, which is why I love my job, but those are some of the key, priorities that I have that I'm spending my time on at any given day.
For sure. One of the questions that's kind of coming in right now, I think is a really good one, which is the difference between kind of private equity backed, growth brand versus a self-sufficient, profitable driven brand. And the difference between, the basic strategies, between those types of scenarios, and just kind of like thinking about timelines as you scale in association with that. Do you, I think you're predominantly been more on the funded growth side of things, but you've also been, you played in different places. So I'm curious, like, how you'd answer that question or just speak to it a little bit. I can kind of chime in from my 2 cents as well, but I think that it's a really important question, especially right now, where capital is a little tighter, or, maybe the belts are needing to tighten up a little bit in different ways. But you still want to grow, intelligently. I'd love for you to just kind of speak to that, like the mindset that you've been in a couple of times now on really kind of publicly facing, growth brands that are successful, versus like, how can you do that when you're not necessarily having the war chest behind you?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things that our co-founder Ashley likes to say is that, and I'm sure it's a saying, but like constraints breed creativity. And another one is no margin, no mission. So, I've mostly been a part of businesses that are funded through their own profitability, but there are so many puts and takes to being profitable, that the channels that you're going into out of the gate, the way that your product's manufactured, et cetera. So I'm not saying that it's a path that everybody can get to. But I think and I'd love to get your 2 cents on it too, Chris, just because you have so much exposure to more brands and more ways of working. But it is a really interesting time where money is not being thrown around. I think it forces everybody to sort of get back to the basics and the principles of like, why did we start this business? What problem is it solving for consumers? And what are the paths in which we can be both effective and whether that be team resources, the channels you're going after, the ways in which you market the product. Because at the end of the day, you could boil the ocean trying to go to every point of distribution and market your product in every rich way. So my biggest, I think my biggest takeaway at a time where money is not so accessible is to really get down to what works really, really well, whether that's the type of retail you're in or how you're communicating with consumers and driving them into your brand, and allow that to be sort of that foundation that helps you start testing into less certain paths, and learning. But I would love your 2 cents on it because it's not as I haven't had as much exposure to the private equity or venture side of things.
Well, I think for me, I call it strengthen the core, right? So where are you selling the best? Where are your most customers? How do you double down on where you are and where it's working? And
Yep.
that tends to be where you have margin and velocity, which are the two things that matter, right? Especially when you're growing a self-sufficient brand.
Yep.
And I've been on the brand side where we've been really investing in the growth and trying to capture margin back and claw back that margin as you can, as you scale MOQs and all the types of things that really impact your unit economics. But it's a much more comfortable place to be if you can accommodate to limit your distribution, to say no when it makes sense to say no, to eliminate all wasteful spending, right? So if you can't really afford to go there, maybe you should wait to go there. And then it's going to make your data better. If you're investing, if you're more focused on your strategies that work, like something I think about related to you and our relationship is when we were talking about where are you in the store. And I remember in the early innings, it's like, this is an occasion based, product. So I'm thinking about like, when does the customer eat this, right? And you were educating me on when the customer actually will buy this product and why. And that has major implications of where it's merchandised in the store, where it's planogrammed in the store. How do we accomplish that task? Like sometimes it can be just as simple as a singular strategy that literally will impact your velocity twofold. So I just think it's strengthen the core, focus on the markets that you have the most potential in, fish where the fish are, and then implement, be hyper focused on implementing a really, really sound strategy based on your consumer insight and consumer feedback. That should produce the data that will put you in a position to go sell more effectively in your next opportunity.
I couldn't agree more. And I think what it all also speaks to is that like this industry is expensive. It's expensive from a trade perspective. It's expensive from an OpEx perspective. So another, I think, enabler of all this is making sure that you're pricing your product in a way that accounts for all of that. Because I think oftentimes that gets in the way. You priced it with one thing in mind, and then you come to realize actually the natural channel is costing us more than X in trade, and I was budgeting for this, and it's a lot harder to take price up. Having conversations around taking price down is way more fun. So I would say start a little bit more conservatively, and then you can really have some fun driving some velocities even harder once you can bring more value to the product.
Yeah, and if you're proving velocity at a higher price product, then you're more exciting to any buyer. And that's the other thing I would say that people often overlook. And I would say when you're true innovation, like you are at MUSH, where it's like overnights is a category that didn't exist when you guys were helping build it and shape it. You like there's nothing to comp against, right? So it's not like just pick a category. It's not olive oil or pasta sauce or mac and cheese that's super established. That you're hit kind of an EDLP that makes sense for the consumer to be able to think about trading up, especially in an environment like this.
Right.
But when you don't have that benchmark, like you have the opportunity actually to go and kind of set a price based on where you think the category can be. So that's another. There's so many variables in strategy, right? But I think that it's important to be aware of all these factors, especially as you're thinking about new line expansion, right? Like if you're
for sure.
You have a core product that's a market leader in a common category, but potentially your brand allows you to go into more of an innovation set. That can be a way to think about scaling as well. So One other question that's coming in is really just the journey of Mush, and kind of thinking through, like, as you've, come from the beginning in a true innovation category. And, we talked about this a little bit where you show up in the store, but we also went through a pack change together. We've been through some things. So, I think you want to know, like, what are those bumps in the road that you got to look out for? What are some of the things that you have experienced along the way with your journey at Mush?
Yeah, for sure. And I think this can kind of speak to developing and refining go-to-market strategy, but um, a lot of brands have these incubation settings, right? So for Mush, it's the farmers market. For RX Bar, it was CrossFit gyms. For Noon, it was bike shops. For a lot of CPG brands, it's D2C. And I think what that really enables is a very fast and effective feedback loop that allows you to unpack all of these things that we're talking about, right? Like what's important to the consumer, how are they engaging with it, et cetera. And coming out of farmers markets and kind of getting started in coffee shops and CrossFit gyms, similarly, we had a package that had a little bit more a larger serving and had extra plastic with a spoon underneath the lid. We were retailing for $3.99 and above, as you remember, Chris, when I got started. And I think we were really trying to solve for this convenience factor. And then as we learned more about how the consumer really, like what was important to the consumer and what it was replacing, which was really other spoonable nutrition, like oatmeal, like cereal, what have you, we realized, okay, well, that, to your point, fish where the fish are, where are other spoonable breakfasts? And, there's no fridge in the cereal aisle yet, though one day I am determined to have a little nice refrigerated 4-foot set within cereal and oatmeal. But because of that, and knowing that the foot traffic for grab and go beverages is just going to be somewhat limited in some cases, we said, well, we really, maybe need to be looking at the dairy cooler, more specifically within yogurt. There's just a lot of single serve nutrition available there, and it definitely is capturing a wide audience. But as we looked at that, we're like, okay, well, we're in this oval cup and we're $3.99, and we're sitting along all of these white round cups that are 10 for 10 and 2 for 3. So the big thing in our journey has been learning and adapting and scaling what works. And whether that be the type of pack that we're in, you guys now know it's in a round cup. We're retailing more for that, $2.29, $2.49 price point, much better value. And we're seeing that in the results in terms of consumer adoption rate, velocity, and retailer adoption rate for that matter as a result of the success. So now it's like, okay, we have this tiger by the tail. How do we keep growing it? And that gets back to some of the things we were talking about around team, around process, around collaboration, because it's so important that as you're growing, all of your functions are kind of like going at the same pace. If sales gets too far ahead or if supply chain gets too far ahead, you're going to create friction. So that's a little bit of a high level of the journey. It's been so fun, to keep learning. Despite being in the industry for a little over 15 years, I'm still learning stuff every day, which is so incredible, and so enriching and so fulfilling. And when I started, we were just six people here in River North, and now we've got over 30 people at headquarters, over 100 people at the plant in Salt Lake City. So that's been really special.
Yeah, that's wild. And you guys do all of your own manufacturing, right?
We do. Yeah. We spent the greater part of 2021 standing up the facility in Salt Lake. We were originally manufacturing out in Southern California where Ashley started the business.
Do you think that that's a big advantage? I think a lot of people are having to use co-man, as part of their anchor strategy. Do you see an advantage or a disadvantage to being the manufacturer?
I think it's a huge advantage that if you're already doing it, it's going to be really, really hard to figure out how to scale, but it just gives you so much more control over your ability to grow from a capacity perspective, over cost to make your product. You're just, and who is going to care more about the quality of your product than you? There's literally no one else that's going to care as much as you. So I think it's a huge advantage, but it is also a huge undertaking. So it's not always going to make sense
Mhm.
for everyone, especially if you didn't get started that way. But I think it can really give you a leg up, especially if you want to scale quickly.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Um, One question that I want to ask is, just the differences in channels, like we're becoming very much an omni-channel world. I know retail is still a huge piece of your strategy. It's our whole world. It's our whole life. I still very much believe in physical retail, but I'm curious, what are the benefits and risks of each channel? And how are you deciding where to allocate your resources?
Yeah. I think it really does go back to what we're kind of talking about in terms of understanding your product's value proposition and how it's being consumed and by who and where they like to either buy or consume similar things. And so that's why I think the benefits and the risks can really vary depending on the type of product that you're manufacturing. So, like for us, for instance, if we were to go into drug, let's say, or like the dollar channel, where you're getting plussed out to thousands, if not tens of thousands of doors in a setting where there's not a lot of high intent to purchase oatmeal, especially like oatmeal as we know it, let alone overnight oats, which is still something that people are wrapping their head around. I can't tell you how many times people are like, I'm eating this cold. I'm like, just trust me. That would be super risky. But if you're launching a supplement, let's say, drug might be one of the best channels to start in. So the way I try to think about channels is really honing in on, like for us, getting back to that spoonable nutrition, we try to point to where is there the greatest share, where is the strongest productivity, where is the adjacent category, where are they growing, and really identifying, who we can go after and what kind of position we could have so that like as we're entering new points of distribution, we sort of have a clear sense of how to get it to work. And those like kind of like proven channels, which will look different for everybody. For us, at the end of the day, oatmeal is a commodity. So, and grocery owns 50% share of oatmeal and cereal. So we can let those channels help us sort of be the foundation to test and learn in newer spaces. Like for us, testing inconvenience is a newer thing that we're sort of gonna walk before we run in on. So like I do think it's really important to go back to that first thing that we mentioned in the beginning, which is like understand your product and who eats it and how and why. So that as you start to think about go to market strategies and the risks and benefits, you're grounded in information that's not going to change too much, at least.
Yeah. And like what are some of the more exciting like either D2C or alt channels that you're seeing out there right now? Like, everything is going to be built off of your foundation of physical retail, but I'm just curious, like, is there anything that's really innovative as a channel that you're seeing right now that you're excited about?
Well, I think, perishable online is very hard.
Yeah.
It's so tough. And that's why we sort of look at our website as a way to really engage with consumers, educate them, speak to them, allow them to try new flavors, learn about the product, versus it's going to be half of our business. Versus at our X bar, I think D2C at one point was 20 to 30% of our business, and people just shop so differently with different types of foods. Now, what really excites me is that there are players who are already doing online, like true D2C grocery really, really well, like a Thrive that are starting to, or an Imperfect Produce or a Misfits, what have you, that are starting to get into the perishable space. And I think that's what's really exciting because as opposed to trying to like isolate somebody's purchase to one item or one brand, we can now really tack on to a platform that's already working really, really well and already has that consumer rate. So I think that's what I think is super innovative and super exciting, is to see sort of these um, companies that have tested and learned and figured out the model for selling groceries online and are now starting to build out more capability. So that's I think what's really cool.
And you're thinking about, I mean, essentially it's no different than any kind of distributor, right? Like I'm selling to the DC, they're getting it to where it needs to go. It's same for,
Yeah.
DC or whatever.
Which
And
is great, because then we can drive, better value, because we're tacking on to pallets and truckloads that are already going to a single point of distribution.
that's why I'll say, like, at the end of the day, you're just moving pallets around the country. It just becomes how efficiently are you doing that, right? Yeah,
Right. As opposed to trying to send a single box to
yeah.
somebody's home with 2 ice bricks and 24 units in it, sending it FedEx 2 days so that it doesn't melt in the summer.
But coordinating, cold logistics and trucking and manufacturing and all the different components that everybody's going to have to deal with when they're scaling a brand, those are all really critical. Like, how much time are you spending on that, and then what are the resources that you have to kind of tackle those types of logistical foundational pieces to your business?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think part of it is adding a geographical element to your go-to-market strategy, especially as you're building to that national stage of business, so that you're able to really start moving as much volume to single points of delivery as possible. And that's really going to help also on the other side of distribution, which is chargebacks and shrink and all of those fun things that we get to deal with. So I think as you're scaling and starting from maybe a really early stage, thinking about that go to market strategy and everything we talked about, and then layering on, like, what are those key markets, like what core markets does my core consumer live in, and let's start there. Let's find an anchor small or regional chain, and then let's build the demand on the independent side and any other classes of trade that pull from that distributor. So I think it's like definitely adding that um, element to your strategy, and then having really great partners internally. We have an incredible supply chain team here, and one person is solely focused on logistics and customer supply chain. And he's been able to do some really incredible things, including how to figure out how to optimize the points of distribution that we have through consolidation, through cross-stocking, all of those things, trying to identify the patterns of where a lot of our volume is going. And actually, he's been able to help us save on freight at a time where everybody's paying more per unit on freight. So I think it's getting the right talent and resources focused on that, because it's a huge, huge, huge critical component, especially as you're scaling.
Awesome. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I have two more questions I want to ask, and then I'm getting flooded with questions here as well. So I want to make sure we get to that for the last bit of time here pretty quickly. But one of the last questions that I wanted to ask is just where, what's your priority, for the next 24 months, where you've just built a strong foundation with a really innovative product and an innovative brand. But, looking ahead, inclusive of the environment we're in, but also just looking ahead for the trajectory of your brand based on where you are. What's most important to you? Where are you leaning in? What does it look like?
Uh, World domination. No. We're like a super aggressive team, so I'm like, I just want to win. I want to be everywhere, right? But I think that there's such a huge opportunity, especially in the that we're in, as we're scaling and offering something that's super nutrient dense but super clean, and actually getting better in value as we scale. I think it's really about continuing to not just hunt in the right places, but harvest in the right places. So, and not only across the basic 4 Ps of assortment and placement and price and promotion, but also integrated marketing and working really, really well together with that team as a whole, because sure, we have grown a ton, but there's still like this many people that know about mush, and then an even smaller amount that have tried it. So I think over the next 24 months, it's really figuring out how do we keep the flywheel turning and even faster, and doing that through, you right sizing our distribution channels, tapping into new ones, marketing the product even more effectively and efficiently, because that's a team that's really just been stood up over the past year and a half, and they're doing some amazing things and some amazing things. So, doing that and continuing to learn and grow as a person, as a professional in the process, and seeing the same for our whole team, and especially the sales team, since I work so closely with them. It's something really, really special to be a part of. And we're really proud of what we're doing, and just want everybody to keep um, keep evolving and enjoying the process, and not maybe focus so much on outcomes. I think that a lot of people can say, I just want to be at this or I want to do that. But if you really start to love the process itself, it makes it a lot more rewarding. So I think like we really just want to keep seeing this brand potential.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. I think it's, you got to have the vision, but it's what you do every day that counts, right? And I think staying focused on that experience. I mean, it's no different than just practicing living in the present and finding your happiness there. It's not going to happen immediately, but you will get those outcomes if you have a daily dedication to it. And
Absolutely. Absolutely.
one question that came in that I really like is,
Okay.
you know, how much she admires the experience that you've gained in your immense experience. But what advice would you give to your younger self starting in the CPG industry, which I like because I imagine like knowing you when you were younger, 15, 20 years ago, which would be fun.
Yeah, I would say trust the process. It goes back to what we were kind of just saying. I graduated college, and a lot of folks that I graduated with got these cool cubicle jobs in big cities, and snazzy computers and all these perks. And at the time, I didn't quite fully wrap my head around what incredible experience I was gaining. I saw it for what it I saw it very face value as like I I drive around to Walmart stores, I merchandise, I sell, like how do I tie this to my future? And it's a little bit of maturity, a little bit of like a lack of awareness, and just a lot of growth ahead. And so I think I would go back and be like, dude, this is experience that not that many people get, and it's going to help you so much. It's something that I look for in every hire, people that have had store level experience, because at the end of the day, it's where the rubber meets the road. It's a very humbling experience. And I think it allows you to really think super critically, be great at prioritizing your time, et cetera, because there's so many directions you can go. And so I would tell myself, be patient, trust the process, and enjoy it. I think I got there, but I definitely like stumbled through my first year, wondering like, what am I doing with my life? I'm in this Chevy Malibu and driving like I'm behind a windshield all day. Like, what is going on? But it's still to this day, I think, one of the most valuable experiences I've had.
Yeah. It's funny. I think about my career as well, and just some of the best moments have been some of the ones where I had the least amount of experience.
Hmm.
Just showing up in a situation and not knowing who you're talking to or whatever. It could be at Expo or a buyer or anybody, but you just cut your teeth, right? Get out there. At the end of the day, dropping cases, shaking hands, doing demos, seeing where your product shows up, getting those extra, placements, those added facings, like those are rewards for just, being out there ready and willing and committed to doing the work, right? And I think that there's just so much to be said for putting yourself out there with a concept that you believe in enough to go through the trouble, because this is a hard business. There's just no way around it, right? And
For sure.
The ultimate reward for me is when somebody picks up your product that you worked on, puts it in the basket, rings it through the register, and pays money for it, and when you watch that happen, that's a powerful moment. But I also just think it's, it's critical to have those experiences and stay connected to those experiences. And like, as much as we'll get into strategies and growth and trade spend and all those things, like at the end of the day, staying connected to your customer is what it's all about, right? And that's an ever-changing thing, so you
Yeah,
gotta, there's a lifespan, I think, on any concept, right? And you got to stay fresh and relevant, especially now where it's more competition than ever before coming into this space, more
for
brands,
sure.
more ways to get in to reach people, a growing customer, right? Like one thing I
Yep.
think a lot is the fact that you know Gen Zs are willing to pay more money, like a higher, like 73% are willing to pay more money for a product that's sustainably minded, right? Compared to
Yeah,
boomers, so 23%. So you have this customer that's more conscious, that wants differentiated products that historically have not been there in the mainstream. So there's so much opportunity right now for people that want to seize it. But you have to do it in a way that resonates with the customer. And it's not enough to think you have a good idea. I've literally launched stuff that doesn't work,
yeah,
and it's okay. It's okay.
yeah,
I thought this was great. I think it's great, but not everybody will, and it's
for
just
sure.
important to be, to be able to kind of innovate with your customer, which ultimately it starts with the person who's buying your product. But I think your customer is also your retail partner. It's also your distributor. I mean, there's so many different connection points for how you grow something. But,
For
one of the things
sure.
I love most about your approach is just, it's the combination of being really smart about how you do it and also just being really, human centric about how you do it. A lot of questions
Sure.
are coming in around nuts and bolts around trade spend, margin, promo. You're kind of in that category, like you mentioned, and, around your pricing, where it's that lower tier, trying to, increase high velocity. Like, just tell me, kind of talk about nuts and bolts, in terms of how you think about promotion, how you think about trade spend, how you think about, unit economics. I know that it's there, those, all of those things could be their own, topic. But just
For sure.
touching, if you frame it in a way of like how that matters, as it relates to this topic, which is, growing your sales. I'd love for you to talk to that about a little bit.
For sure. And if you're at a stage where you have the ability to more easily affect your list cost, the principles may help you get to that gross margin piece. But I think it's really important to understand your category. So like some of the work that we've done previously is look at the pricing slope across cereal, across oatmeal, across yogurt, across refrigerated bars, across similar products that people are eating for breakfast and a snack, to understand what are the base prices as you go from specialty channels all the way to club. And again, this is where some of the data comes in. What is the typical percentage of units sold on promo? And then it's about really understanding how each channel works, and thus how much it would cost you to promote in any given channel. And that's where a really strategic broker partnership can come in to really get that expertise. But we broke it down very simply to like, anything from specialty to natural at a full service distribution model, to natural at a low markup distribution channel, to conventional direct, all the way down the line to club, and really broke that down to say, all right, I think that these different channels are going to cost me this much in trade, just by putting some rough estimates of like how much it's going to cost to promote and how many of my units sold are going to be on promo, and what percent of my business I think each of these classes will be. And then get yourself to a place where you have that understanding, so you can price things in a way that you get down to a net cost that gives you the margin you need to run your business. So that's some of the, like the basic fundamentals, is like really building that slope and seeing how it can apply to you can kind of put some easy formulas into Excel to say, all right, we're averaging that each of these channels are sort of X% of the other, and plug in what you think your highest price is going to be, and then it kind of flows from there, and start getting an understanding of what level of investment you're going to need, and price it accordingly and give yourself wiggle room. You can always come down.
Yeah.
Can't stress that enough. It's really fun to tell a customer that you're dropping their price. It is not fun to have those, especially in this day and age, the price increase conversation. So I know that's really like high level. I could probably spend hours chatting about trade and margin, but happy to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Happy to chat further. Swing by my booth in the basement at Expo, and would be more than happy to chat about all things pricing.
For sure. What booth number are you, by the way?
5100. So right when you walk in the basement, we're 2 booths in to the right. We're right next to Liquid Death, I think, which
nice.
always has a lot of excitement in their booth. They always have like a coffin with ice and the cans in there. They do some really cool stuff.
That's like the sustenance corner, right? And go get your oats and your water, refuel. Everybody needs that at the show.
Especially when you're eating a ton of weird things that you don't know what's in it, and you're going to need some fiber to help you digest all that.
Good old fashioned cement mixer.
Yeah.
So crazy. I was like, oh man, an hour seems like a long time, but with you, as usual, it always completely flies by. Well, last question I'm going to ask, which came in, which is a good one, and I kind of think about this a lot. How do you distinguish between your gut and whether it's data or other intelligence, or basically just any other kind of factor that's shaping your decisions? Like, when do you trust your gut versus the other things that you have to measure? Because I think that those can be in alignment, but sometimes they're not, and sometimes you got to make that call. So like, when do you trust your gut?
Well, I think that when your gut continues to be rooted in your mission and your value system and the consumer, those things that you've worked really, really hard to establish, I would say that's where it's time to maybe reduce a little noise, because the bigger you get and the more people you start to network with, the more opinions that you get, unsolicited or not. And sometimes I feel like that can get back to that shiny objects point of like, you're getting you should do this and you should do that and you should try this and you should make that, and have you ever thought about marketing it this way? And I think those are all things to think about, reflect on, digest, and make sense of. And then when you're stuck, I think if your intuition is guiding you in a way that feels like it's super aligned to all these like core principles of your business and you as a leader, probably a good path to take. And then sometimes, maybe it's just a check-in with trusted advisors, trusted mentors, what have you. But I'm a very intuitive but also analytical person. So sometimes I'm like, I have a hard time articulating this, but my gut is telling me to do that. But Mark Cuban always tells Ashley this, like, trust your gut, stick to your guns, keep moving forward. So I think your heart will always send you in a really good place.
Yeah. I know you to be both very intuitive and also very analytical. And that's why I thought it was a good question. Because I think we all kind of grapple with that at times, and sometimes it's more important than others, but it's a really big piece of the equation, in my opinion. And I'm much more gut.
Yeah.
But it's, at the end of the day, like there's a feedback loop to any decision that you make, and it's how you can react to that, but I think you need to have confidence. Whichever way you're going to go, you need to have confidence, and you need to fight for it if you're going to make that call.
Yeah. And I feel like when you're if you're skeptical of something that's an idea or a path or a decision, it's probably a good chance to lean into your discomfort and learn more about it by way of other people's knowledge or data. That's something that I think you also have to be cognizant of, is that your intuition can lead you so far that you're so strongly like you want to have strong opinions loosely held. So I think that like that's an opportunity to really lean in to say, well, what does the data say, or what do other sources say, so that you do keep that intuition a little bit in check too.
Finding your discomforts when you really start living, right?
Exactly.
All that the other
I
day.
didn't think I was going to finger gun today, but I really did. So that's great. What a way to close it out.
For sure. Laura, thank you so much for the time. As always, it's a real pleasure to spend some time with you, and I can't wait to give you a squeeze next week.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. And thank you guys all for the questions, really great ones, and hope to see a lot of you at Expo. And Chris, thank you for the time as well. This was great.
Awesome. Thanks so much, all. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.